Well, welcome to the show today, Julia. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here and to be connected to you.
Yeah, same here. Yes, and there's so many different types and personalities and stories in our space. So I always have just the opportunity to share you all with my listeners and myself too, because I'm gonna, like the listeners, I'm gonna get to know you on a deeper level today. So why don't you start off about just your type one journey? That's it's kind of how we start. Is just to kind of learn, and I know that resonates with a lot of other listeners. Just to see where you are, where you started, and where you are now.
Yeah, thank you. Like yourself, I love hearing other people's stories, so I'm eager to go back into your podcast and uncover more of them. As for me, my type 1 diabetes journey started when I was 10 years old. I was experiencing a lot of the classic
Mm.
warning signs of type 1 diabetes, getting up to go to the bathroom a lot at night, frequent irritability, which was unusual for a 10-year-old girl. I was too young to be going through puberty, so it
Right.
didn't seem like hormones were involved. Also, an increased thirst and sometimes an increased appetite. So,
Mm.
my parents thought it was a bad flu bug, and I think a lot of people with type 1 diabetes might share that experience with their doctors or caregivers, thinking that it was some sort of virus. But luckily, my mom decided to take me to the doctor where I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes and they ruled out anything else, and all through a simple prick of the finger with a blood glucose meter. I don't remember my exact levels, and I've asked my mom before, neither does she. I think I was in the 500s, so they
Okay.
caught it fairly early comparatively. And since then, there's been a lot of ups and downs for me in life with type 1 diabetes, just based on where I was at in different stages of my life. I think I went through the phases of grief a little
Mm.
bit,
Mm.
like denial and anger and resentment, to moving towards acceptance and embracing it. And sometimes, even now at 31 years old, I still go through those cycles just because, you've gone through it before. I can remember times where I was 16 and not really wanting to take care of my diabetes anymore, wanting a break. And I didn't
Mm.
have the words for diabetes burnout. I didn't have anyone to
Mm.
discuss it with
Mm.
until the influx of social media and online community really came about in my early 20s. And I finally found that source of connection where I really embraced it more and more and have leaned in and now have made it my life's work. And it just feels very fulfilling to have moved from, feeling okay, navigating it, to navigating that resentment, and now feeling really great about where I am in my
Mm.
career and personal journey. And there's still a lot ahead, and I'm sure there'll be more ups and downs along the way.
Right. So where do you can you pinpoint the turning point that your thinking changed, or like maybe like many of us, it's constantly, just kind of, reminding ourselves. Yeah,
Yeah,
was
I
there a
think
certain
there's
time?
yeah, I think there's a bit of that, of needing to remind myself at various times. But for me, I definitely go back to 17, and I remember 16 or 17, and I remember it was a few weeks where I just didn't want to manage my diabetes, and I wasn't um, I wasn't taking care of myself in the way
Mm.
that I needed and the way that my body deserved. And I think when I look back, what I really needed more than anything was to be able to talk to someone
Mm.
who understood. And somehow I managed to pull myself out of that. I don't know if I had met someone or ended up having that conversation. I don't recall. I think it was a lot of self-discovery and just wanting to be able to participate in all of the activities that I was passionate about, and realizing that if I didn't take care of my diabetes, I wasn't going to be able to do the things that I loved. And I never wanted to be a person who let it hold me back.
Mm.
But at the same time, offering myself that grace. I think it's okay to go through those periods of anger and denial and
Mm.
frustration. Diabetes is really hard and it can be really isolating. I didn't know anyone else with type 1 diabetes growing up.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
it was complicated.
Yeah, I do
And it just
understand.
took a lot of, yeah, internal talking to myself about how am I going to get through this? What's
Hmm.
really driving me? And how am I going to get to the next goal and the next step and not be
Yeah,
limited by my disease?
right. Yeah. So, yeah, and you clearly don't see it as a limitation. So, the term superpower, I love that. Right? I always, I know what we have to do and the decisions that we make on a daily basis.
Yeah,
Some days more than others, but it really does take a superhuman to to take this on, and to do it well. It's
absolutely.
not like we're grading ourselves, although some days
Hmm.
I know we feel like we are, but just trying to
Yeah,
keep that in perspective. But what about turning that into opportunities? So to use it for your good rather than it bringing you down. Yeah.
yeah, I love that. And I'm going through the process of a health and wellness coaching program, and I'm learning more about that, and I'm
Mhm.
applying some of the practices on myself. And I think just what I've realized is that when you lean in and learn how to work with your problems and embrace them rather than deny them and resent them, you're
Yeah.
all the better for it. So when I am
Yeah.
having those rough days, I kind of remind myself, like, yeah, this sucks. And it's okay to say that and it's okay to feel that way, but you can't hold on to that feeling. You need to
Yeah.
feel through and keep leaning back in and connecting with yourself and finding ways to make your problems work for you. And that's
Hmm.
really what I go back to.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. And we all have challenges in life. This just happens to be ours. Um,
Right.
and
Yeah.
and we can use challenges to teach us. And we have lots of opportunities to learn when we're managing blood sugar. And
Definitely.
just to warn you, because you're younger, you're just in your 30s. There's going to be even more changes coming up hormonally.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Although, you obviously see hormonal changes, with your monthly cycles, if we can go ahead and say
Right.
that. And then you don't need to give any details. But I understand that. But, when I was your age, there was no information about that. There was no
Yeah.
connection, correlation to how those other hormones were impacting not only my energy and my mood and those things, which impact how we manage diabetes and how diabetes responds, blood sugar responds. So it's great that, again, that kind of taps on to all the information that we do have available now. And but so how do you use that information for your good, without it overwhelming, maybe your thoughts or your decisions? That's the hard part, isn't it? Because, yeah, we don't lack information, do we?
Right. Yeah, and it's such a powerful and wonderful thing, but at the same time, you have to take it in doses, for
Mm,
lack of better phrasing,
right.
because it can be overwhelming if you read about, if you don't do this now, you could face this later. And while it's wonderful to be proactive, sometimes for me, I suffer from overthinking and I need to get outside of my own head. So taking
Hmm.
it one day at a time and taking the information in doses can be really valuable for the stress management that's involved in managing diabetes. Because I do want to get it right most of the time. Because
Hmm.
if I'm getting my sugars in a good place, if I'm meeting my time and range, I'm going to feel better and I'm going to show up as the person that I want to be. So definitely for me
Understood.
personally, taking it in chunks, and it really helps.
Yeah, yeah. So what type of therapy do you use? Are you on an insulin pump, CGM? Yeah. So what's your protocol
I
right now?
Yeah, so I'm on multiple daily injections.
Uh,
I have a smart pen. I
mm,
Yeah,
I
I
can
am a little
relate. Yes.
okay. Okay, nice. I
I
was
was
gonna
on
say I
this.
might be a little unusual for people with type 1,
No.
but
And
that's good to hear.
yeah, I was on. So you talk about the InPen.
Yes.
Yes, yes,
Hmm.
and we've done some episodes specifically on that. So I was on MDI for many years. I just switched over to a pump about 3 months ago. So I'm brand new to pumping. So interesting.
Oh, very
Yes,
cool. How's it
yeah.
going for you?
So far so good. And again, it's more learning, it's more adjusting, it's more forgiveness. And I tend to be, I'm the type that, once I decide on something, I kind of keep my feet planted because I want to see it through. In most cases, I
That's a
mean,
good
there's
way to
definitely
be.
some things that we can just say, okay, this is not serving me. And I think we
Hmm.
intuitively know that when this is
Yeah.
just not jiving with our energy, and obviously blood sugar management. But yeah, it's been a learning tool. And I keep wanting for it to get even better and more consistent. And from what I understand, the Omnipod 5 really kind of, that algorithm kind of has to learn us. So
Oh,
I'm
interesting.
just
Okay.
sitting back and letting it learn me. So
Right. And that's the great thing about having options and
hmm
that different bodies respond to different things. And
Sure.
just having that variety is so important for people in the community.
I agree. I agree. So how does MDI, have you always been MDI?
I tried a pump
Did you?
for a while. I wanted to see what it was like and if it could help my management. And for me, when it was working, it was great. But when it didn't work, I thought, I'd rather deal with the problems of MDI than the insulin pump because I had just felt like I'm kind of an expert in MDI and how to approach MDI with myself and my own body. So that works for me. I'm happy
Yes.
that this pump works for others, but I think I'm going to
hmm
go back to the MDI.
Okay, I love that. I love that. Yes, and that's a good example of just empowering ourselves, knowing what's best, what's working. And there's a lot of. I remember when I switched over to the pump, trying it out. I felt like I was like, I kind of leaving a little bit of my identity. It sounds a little funny because I was always the MDI girl. 42 years
Right.
MDI, and it's like felt like I was losing, kind of like, removing an arm almost because it was such a different way. And like I was giving up on it or disassociating myself with that type of therapy, which I don't. I don't disassociate myself with that. And I know, just like you say, we can always go back. We're lucky. And if you're
Yeah.
like me, you have good insurance, very blessed with that. Just the options that we
Absolutely.
have access to. Not everybody can say that.
Right.
And yeah, just take it one day at a time, right?
Yes, definitely.
So tell us about your work and how diabetes, and just because I love you have amazing, just, the mindset and your thinking, and you're still so young too. I love this. It's
Oh, thank
so
you.
encouraging. It's amazing to see somebody in your space doing what you're doing and the many years you have to continue to give and to give back and to share as you continue to grow and learn yourself. So it's just it's kind of like watching a butterfly, when they leave and and they do their
Yeah.
thing and they hatch from the cocoon. So tell me about work and how this is tell us a little bit about what you're doing and how diabetes fits into it, or does it?
Yeah, that's very kind. Thank you. And as you know, I've kind of completely immersed myself in the diabetes space and all of the ways you can think about it. Obviously, I'm showing up in all settings with the lived experience of someone with type 1 diabetes. I've been living with it for over 21 years. So when I'm approaching any part of my work life, whether it's my full-time job or my passion work that I'm doing in my free time, I'm always thinking of how can I help the community? How can I make sure that they're put first, that they're considered in the choices that I'm making in my strategic recommendations or my creative decisions.
Mm.
And I think one of the parts that I'm really excited about is the newsletter that I decided to start earlier this year, connecting professionals who want to find more effective ways to integrate wellness and work while
Mm.
navigating chronic illnesses like diabetes. Writing is just such a key part of who I am, sharing
Mm.
my story, sharing other people's stories, so that no one really has to feel alone. And that's really how my children's books came about as well. Because when I was growing up with type 1 diabetes,
Mm.
I I didn't have social media. I didn't know anyone. So I really want to
Yeah.
make sure at whatever life stage a person with, type 1, type 2, whatever form of diabetes they have, doesn't feel alone and
Mm-hmm.
feels supported and feels
Hmm.
comfortable and confident talking about their diabetes and asking for help when they need it. I think children oftentimes don't have the words, so helping them find the words was very
Mm.
important for me in building my children's book series as well.
Yes, yes, and so validating. When you can, say the words, write the words, and somebody says, "Oh, wow, yeah." So it's not just me. Somebody else feels this or has been through this. Yeah, yeah.
Yes,
Nothing better.
absolutely.
Yeah. So what advice would you give to other professionals? And maybe this is something that you're already doing in your writings that may be living. And we can specifically talk about type 1 diabetes. So, what advice when it comes to pairing, balancing work life, professional life, career goals, and still trying to stay healthy?
Yeah, absolutely. Throughout my past decade of experience working in professional settings, I've really learned the value of setting boundaries, which can be
Mm,
very hard because it can feel like letting other people down. Um, but I think what I've realized is that, you cannot control how someone else feels or reacts to you. You
mm,
can only control how you're feeling and how you're reacting to a situation. So, by setting boundaries, especially when it comes to your health, because if we're managing our health, we're going to be able to show up a lot better
mm.
at work. We're going to be able to show up more energized and more motivated and ready to approach the day. Um,
So
when we're
true.
setting
So
those
true.
boundaries, it sets an example for other people who might not know how or might not
Mm.
feel comfortable or confident. And it's hard for me too. I'm certainly not an expert at it. I think it's hard for everyone. But when we really learn to put up those guardrails for ourselves, I think that we're going to feel calmer and more holistic when we're approaching our lives.
I love that. I love that. Now, so on LinkedIn, your newsletter, and it's just the same newsletter that you were just referring to,
Yes.
and it's called Chronically Climbing.
Yes.
I love that. I love that.
Thank you. I
I
have to
love
give credit to my friend Kim because she's in PR and I poked
the.
her brain about the best titles and what I was going for, and the suggestion came from her.
Yeah, I love that, because yes, type 1 is chronic. Life is
Hmm.
chronic because,
Yeah,
it's something, right? I mean, it's something we're living
definitely.
with, something we're working through. But if we choose, we can continue to climb and learn and to use it to our advantage, right? I think, and
Hmm.
we started talking about just how, and this is something I've done as well, is just turning my pain, because for years I was in a lot of pain and denial with my diagnosis, poor care,
Yeah.
why me, the whole,
Yeah.
those things that we go through, that grief. I didn't even
Mhm.
realize it was grief. It was just,
Yeah.
yeah, it was just where I was. Again, there wasn't as much talking about it or even articles written
No.
about it back in those days. But realizing that there is a purpose in living with a chronic disease, and I can chronically climb and
Yeah.
reaching people and, to spread our word. And it's just like, what we can do with our faith too. It's really sharing our story and our testimony. And that's connecting to people and bringing people together. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm. Has there, like, with this newsletter, what and I already know what inspired you, so that was obviously, just hearing your story. Um, have you any particular feedback or anybody's response to reading this? We'd love to hear some examples.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's funny because I recently reached out to people within my network asking them for direct feedback. Because I think when you put the call out there, like, hey, I want your feedback, what are you taking from this? People can think, well, she doesn't care about my opinion. I'm just going to
Oh,
keep moving by. But I think reaching out directly has helped me gain some constructive and positive feedback to keep going and come up with new ideas around sharing. I was really pleased when I put out my first two articles to see the response. It was really motivating. I think I got over 60 comments on the first article I put out there, and it was just really validating to me that maybe again other people were feeling this way. They wanted to hear stories like this, and maybe they're going back to work and are applying it in the work setting or even their home
Okay.
life.
Yes, yes, there you go. Because everything is connected to our home life as well, and all those
Hmm.
relationships, right? Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
definitely.
yes. So what do you think is the number one kind of challenge right now for people in the workplace when it comes to also managing diabetes? What kind of things are they talking about? Is there
Yeah, that's a great
some,
question.
yeah,
I think about when you think about the workplace in general, anywhere that you work and can be uncomfortable speaking up about your diagnosis, and you're not required to.
that's true.
But I think there's also value, especially if you're working on site. Not everyone works remote. There's still hybrid settings as well. It can be really valuable to let your boss know just in case
Hmm.
something happens. So maybe just selecting a few trusted coworkers to say, hey, I have this condition, so if I appear offline for 15 minutes at a time, I might just be dealing with a blood sugar scenario, but don't worry, I'm going to come right back. You really
Yeah.
have to do what feels right for you and protect yourself because unfortunately there might
Mm-hmm.
also be some work environments out there that aren't as accepting around
Mm-hmm.
people talking about chronic illness or
Yeah.
their health issues at work. So it really takes careful assessment of the environment that you're in and then asking yourself, what do you feel comfortable with and who do
Mm-hmm.
you feel comfortable with?
Yeah, yeah, I really like that. Yeah, absolutely. And as we all know, communication's important. But yeah, and it
Yes,
goes back to those boundaries too, because you gotta have
right.
to you have to set, or determine what feels safe, what feels important to share. Um, yeah, and all about, I think back to my days in the corporate day, because back in those days we were actually in the office every day, so it
Yeah,
wasn't as remote.
I know.
Just the things I would have done differently and shared more, been more vulnerable, and because it
Hmm.
just naturally brings people together when they get to learn another side of you. And I think
Yeah.
too, like any health condition, whether it's chronic or maybe it's just an acute situation that somebody's experiencing, we can even put that label on ourselves that, it's a sign of weakness. It's a sign of
Right.
not as strong or as sharp or as
Hmm.
um, kind of like the best part of a work team, like it's going to, that we're going to be judged on that. But I think that starts with our
Hmm.
own minds because we can convince ourselves that, well, it's like, okay, well, is this going to prevent me from, being my best self at work and contributing at a higher level? Um, so I think we have to be careful with how we even determine in our own minds because it starts with our thinking,
Very,
right?
very true.
Yeah, yeah. Is this something that you've experienced personally? Maybe a situation, a work situation, or relationship that you've had to come across this?
That's a great question, and it just got me thinking about the times where, probably 5 years ago at this point, I was going to work at the office, and I wasn't incredibly vocal when I started at that workplace about living with diabetes. And I remember my CGM going off and someone saying, "What is that? What is that?" And
Yeah.
I didn't feel very comfortable sharing because the advice that I got from my parents was just be careful about what you share, and very well intentioned of them because they grew up in a setting where that wasn't necessarily okay to share in the
Mm-hmm.
workplace. So it was out of protection, definitely them
Right.
giving me that advice. And I think I take that with a grain of salt now. How much protection do I need to show myself when I'm showing up in different situations today? There's definitely a level of vulnerability when we're sharing about type 1 diabetes. But like you said, it usually brings out vulnerability in others. When we
Mm.
share about ourselves, other people are more comfortable sharing because they see
Yeah.
us as someone they could be open and transparent with.
Right, right. And that can only deepen a working relationship, just like
Yeah,
it
definitely.
it helps with all our relationships for sure. Yeah. Just
Yeah,
kind of,
we all need like water cooler banter, and we all still want those human to human connections.
we
So
sure
sharing
do.
is very
Mm-hmm.
important.
So what do you have any practical tips as far as, is there things that you look at on a, maybe a day-to-day, your strategies to stay motivated and positive and to continue to use it as your superpower? Because I love that term and it's real important to, another thing, and I'll let you answer that because I wanted to ask you another thing that is really kind of connected to that just kind of triggered in my mind too.
Okay. Do you mean
So
tips
what,
around my
yeah,
diabetes management or my
exactly.
mindset around diabetes? Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
just your day to day, as far as how you're able to kind of strategize, what you do, how you do it, and how you kind of correlate that with your um, work tasks, right? The things that
Yeah,
we know that we need to spend time and focus on.
definitely. So, when I think about my diabetes management during the day, it's years and years of reflecting on patterns and how my body responds
Mm,
to, you know, it- a lot of inactivity. The reality is that I'm often sitting a majority of my day, but one
mm,
way that I can mitigate that and make sure that I am getting some movement in with which helps with my blood sugar stability. Actually, you can see it behind me is my office pad. So I'll
mm-hmm,
walk like very slowly as I'm doing some work and it helps, get the creative juices flowing, for lack of better
mm,
phrasing.
mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm.
those are definitely some things that come to mind, as well as just really simple things, making sure that I'm eating regularly. I worked with a nutritionist last year that evaluated some of the things going on in my body and said, hey, actually, if you eat
Cool.
every 2 to 3 hours and you eat these certain types of foods, it can really support your blood sugar stability. So just getting that validation and
Mm,
affirmation from her and seeking out support has been really beneficial in
yeah.
my diabetes management. And another simple thing, making sure I drink enough water during the day.
Mm.
It
Yeah.
helps with blood sugar stability and it's such an easy and accessible option to promote that for me. So I always make sure I fill up my big jug of water in the morning.
Yeah. 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 And that's funny. Yeah. Because there's not too many things we can control of any of us,
Right.
diabetes or not. But those things that you mentioned, things like, making time to move, having the water available, those are things we can put an action step around.
Hmm.
And that's only going to help blood sugar and it's only going to help our relationship with that time of day and what we need and what our body
Definitely.
needs to feel its best. So yeah, I love that you brought up a couple of my favorites. Movement and water is just, again, it's accessible. Yeah.
Definitely. I'll
Mm-hmm.
also say that if I am seeing my blood sugar rising and I know I even need 1 or 1.5 units of insulin, I'll just turn off my camera for a moment. I'm still listening. I go and do it. I'm back in a minute.
Mm,
Making sure I actually pause for that is super important to me, and it's not a problematic thing to do in my workplace
mm.
setting.
I love that pause. Yes,
Yeah.
yes, you and your diabetes deserves a pause.
Yeah.
Love that. Love that. Okay. Is there any specific like myth or misconception around diabetes that you think more, some things that people tend to have in their brain or their thoughts about, what life with T1D is that you wish people understood a little bit better?
Oh my gosh, there's so many. In
Yeah.
my past work, I helped lead some campaigns and
Mm,
participated in some campaigns that were led by colleagues that had a wealth of knowledge to share with me around stigma. And the one that immediately comes to mind is shame. And I know people with
mm,
all types of diabetes experience it that. And it's not just shame from others, but the shame we feel from within ourselves. That's why some people don't want to wear devices or
yeah.
show off their
Mm-hmm.
devices because they don't want someone to look at them and think, oh, they're wearing this. They must be unhealthy when,
Right.
that's not the case.
Right.
It's a
Right.
tool to help you feel better
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
help you manage your diabetes more effectively. And if you have access to it, that's such an
Yeah.
amazing
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
And I would love to just take away all of the shame that
Yeah.
people with diabetes feel and the shame that they might receive from others. So hopefully, as a collective, we can keep working towards making that change.
Yeah, yeah, and I think just like what you mentioned,
Yeah,
being visible, taking I don't know if you're comfortable with taking your injections in public. That's something I slowly got
I
more
am.
comfortable with.
I am
Okay,
now.
good for you.
I wasn't before though.
Yeah.
I was told go to the bathroom to take
Mm-hmm.
your shot.
Yeah.
So it was very invisible for a
Yeah.
long time.
Yeah. But so it does lie in us. It lies in our
Hmm.
bravery, our willingness to
Yeah.
say, okay, this is what I need to do. This is who I am. This is what I'm wearing. And of course, and there's, again, we talk about information. There's a lot of information out there. I think it's confusing. I mean,
Hmm.
in general, when people hear the word diabetes, I mean, I have close friends that, we spend time with, that still, I just don't think they get it.
Right.
And, but I think too, it depends on the person and the type of management we have and how we
Hmm.
portray what it is that we have to do. I think in a
Yeah.
sense, they almost, their perception is that it's no big deal because
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
It
I've
must
gotten
not,
that feedback a lot.
right. So maybe we need to cry and complain more in public. I don't know.
Yeah, there's the solution.
Right? We're walking around too brave and like we got it together. But
Yeah.
again, that's the surface, because, and
Hmm.
again, everybody's a little different how we kind of
Yeah.
display it or don't display it, emotionally put it out there or emotionally not put it out there. And I think that comes with time too, because I don't know that
Oh, definitely.
depends on the type of situation and the relationship and how comfortable they are to hear it. But I don't know about you, but my favorite thing is to talk about diabetes. I mean,
Me too.
right? Somebody either they see my pump or they see my CGM and I light up. I'm like, yeah,
I know.
let me share. Let me share. Yeah. It's
Yeah, I want to share about it, talk about it as much as people will let me. I remember I was talking to a group of people. I'm like, I'm a diabetes nerd, just to preface before I start this conversation. And some people were like, okay.
yes. 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 You're reminding me of Ginger Vieira. I'm sure you're familiar with her. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love Ginger. I was just
Yes.
talking to her yesterday,
Yeah.
actually.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
She's
Yes.
doing such great work in the space.
She
So,
is. Yes. And yeah,
yeah.
she's put a brand on that and
I
it's just
know.
yeah, I
Yeah.
love it. Yeah. Yeah, she's relatable and
Had to sneak
accessible.
in the name drop.
Hmm. Love it. Love it. So what if you could go back and tell your younger self something different? What would you say if you only knew,
Ooh.
right? What would you say?
Hmm.
No, I'm kind of getting you with some questions today too. I know we can laugh about it, and I don't mean to stump you, but yeah,
Wow.
and I'm thinking about the same answers because there's so many different
Um,
things.
I know.
Um,
It's so
and
sweet to think of your
hmm
child self too. Like
yeah,
what was my child self worried about and what were the big
right.
questions that she had? I know like a silly question I had was, Mom, am I gonna be able to get Dairy Queen after this? That was all I wanted when I was out of the hospital, and
Right.
she didn't know. And
Mm,
I was just, it's those little things that
yeah.
kids worry about, but also I think just in a deeper sense, I would say to her, Julia, one day you're not going to feel like a burden, and you're going to know that your disease doesn't make you less. You're enough, and you're going to be
Yeah.
okay.
You're gonna be okay. Yes. Yes. Things are gonna work out. Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And all things there's hope for sure.
Yeah.
Hmm. Do you have any final thoughts before I'm gonna ask you to just kind of share how our listeners can get in touch with you? But is it any final giveaways or not giveaways, takeaways? Do you have any final takeaways as far as advice for people in the workforce, in the workplace, that are just striving to just kind of hang on to that sense of hope and
Yeah.
just seeing how we can use this disease as our power source rather than weighing us down.
Yeah, I would say simply to trust your gut and really listen to yourself. Ask yourself what you need or what you want in this moment or
Mm,
out of this experience. And just because you might see someone else who's more comfortable talking about it doesn't mean that you have to share. You have to do what's right for you at the end of the day. So just trust your gut when it comes
Mm.
to finding your integration between work, wellness, and diabetes.
I really like that. Yes, absolutely. And I think too, to lean on others. I think
Yes,
we're forced to be so independent and strong. And
I
like I was
know.
saying, I know it's like it's okay to ask for help or just to take a deep breath and say, "Gosh, this has been a rough day." Just to say it
Yes,
out loud and not feeling like we're always just kind of trudging through it, just to kind of take the stress off of ourselves for sure. Really
absolutely. Amen to
good.
that.
Yes, yes. So, how can our listeners find you and connect with you?
Oh, great question. Thank you for asking. So you can find my professional portfolio at heyitsjuliaflaherty.com. There's no apostrophe with it since it's a website. And then
Okay.
I also have Chronically Climbing, which is on LinkedIn. So if you want to
Mm-hmm.
connect with me there, I'm also on Instagram and Threads right now. So would
Okay.
love to connect with you. It's my absolute pleasure to meet more people with diabetes and
Mm-hmm.
just talk about it. So I would
Yeah.
love to connect.
Yes, yes. And we'll be sure to link all that to make it easier for everybody. So thanks again. And this is
Awesome. Yeah,
I thought
thank
this was a
you.
great conversation. It's just another way to, we just to kind of deepen what we're thinking. And we can do that better when we're talking amongst each other. And these questions pop up and it gets us thinking, which is good. It's good that we're thinking and we're reflecting. And most importantly,
Yeah,
we're learning. So yeah, thanks.
it's
Thanks for,
very healing. So I really
yes.
appreciate it as well.
Oh, well, we appreciate you, Julia. And yeah, be sure to share this show and
I
have a
will.
beautiful day. And we will be back in here same time next week. Bye for now.